we'll do is start back here and everybody just introduce themselves and we'll go around the room, please.
Dawn DeSorcy, Park and Rec.
Ryan Hartman, Human Resources.
Dan Hostins, Police Department.
Jay Bemke, District 8.
Patrick Delaney, District 7.
Dennis Pollock, District 6.
Jay Cotton, District 5.
Tom Rome, District 4.
Thank you. Item number 1, call the meeting to order at 2:17. Item number 2, discuss and consider for approval a pay increase for the head lifeguard position at the aquatics facility, ranging from $13 to $16 per hour. Dawn or Ryan, please.
Oops. So right now, the way our pay scale works is our head guard positions are $13 starting, and the max they can be at is $14 an hour. I would propose that we have a head guard right now who has, she's on her 4th year, and I would suggest that she get paid $16 an hour, or anyone that has been here for 4 years as a lifeguard in a head guard position be paid $16 an hour, because we don't have a rate for that. If you look at comparables in the state, head guard positions pay anywhere between $15 and $20 an hour. So I think 16 kind of fits in between there, and it fits right in our pay scale as we have it.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Jake?
Thank you. So in terms of the aquatic center, especially if you've been there, in terms of the importance of a head lifeguard position, I think the current job market for this age range of candidates, or the current person in the position that we get, they obviously have a lot of options out there that compete with $13 an hour, if not $16 an hour. And rather than be stuck in a position where we're without head lifeguard or without some of these positions, I think it is necessary to keep up with the labor market, as I would with any department here, because we don't want to have to deal with turnover, especially in the middle of a season. So I'm in support of this in terms of it going from 13 to 16. I know we pay very close attention to the budget around here, which is important, but I don't think this is really going to impact it compared to the potential cost of having a higher wage employee have to, like Dawn, for example, fill in a position like that, or whoever it would be. So I'm in support of it, and I'll motion to approve it.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Tom, Dennis, Patrick, go ahead.
How many lifeguards are there currently? Head lifeguards?
There are 4 head lifeguards and 1 sub, but this would be, the other head guards are in the position for the first year. So they would actually be at the $13. Next year they would be at $13.50, $14 for the 3rd year, and then at the 4th year they would be at $16.
And how much of an increase would this be?
From what it is currently,
Correct.
it would be $2 an hour
No, I
for
mean,
the 4th year.
I mean total
Total, it was like $700 for the season.
per position?
One right now, it's just the one person that's in this position that has been there for 4 years, or on her 4th year.
Is it mandated by state law to have a lifeguard, a head lifeguard, while it is open?
I believe it is. They need to have somebody in that office paying attention to what all the guards are doing, and then they will come out if the guards need something. They will fill in. They do the scheduling and that sort of thing also. We work together on that stuff, but the head guard is the main one in that office when I'm not there.
Any other questions?
I'm not done yet.
Oops, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
For future years, do you know what the increase would be for future years?
At this time, like I said, we would be in year 1 with all of our current head guards. So they would be at 13 this year, $13.50 next year. I don't know if we'll have another individual that will stay with us for 4 years. I hope that they will. I think on that 4th year, they have so much experience and know so much about how everything works. It's a huge help. So I hope that we have somebody in that position again. I don't know if we will.
All right. Thank you.
Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. If somebody would have to fill in for this person for a day or two or something, do they get any higher pay? I know they wouldn't get the 16, but will they get an extra 50 cents or something to take her place?
It's based on years of experience. So there are other head guards. Basically, this guard works from Friday to Sunday, but she worked earlier in the season. She worked last week, Monday through Thursday, because she was able to. Otherwise, her availability is on weekends only. So we do have other head guards that will work during the week, but they are in their first year of employment with us as a head guard. So they would be at 13 an hour.
Okay, so they would always stay at whatever they're
However
hired
many
at.
years, it would be based on their experience.
Okay, thank you.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I'll second it. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Yes.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Thanks, Dawn. Item number 3, discuss and consider for approval of proposed changes for the Deputy Chief of Police, Police Lieutenant, and Police Sergeant job descriptions within the department. See attached. And Ryan, Chief?
So I've provided all of the descriptions to you prior to today. Oh, sorry. All right, I've provided the position descriptions prior to today, so everyone should have seen those. There's not a lot of changes in the job descriptions. The only marked change that I think I would like to bring to your attention would be with the police lieutenants and a requirement of their to either have a bachelor's degree upon promotion or be willing to take classes and complete a bachelor's degree after they've been appointed. And I detailed that in here. If you'd like me to read that to you, I can. Otherwise,
If you could speak to a little bit about what you and Jay might have been speaking about with some of what's not included here and fill me in on.
So currently we have a budget for the police department that's based on the collective bargaining agreement for education, tuition reimbursement for education. And that budget for the year is, I believe, is $10,000. And in doing the math from the recent requests for reimbursement that I've received, that'll get us about 6 classes in a year total, maybe 6 and a quarter if you, to be exact. It's about $1,600, a little over $1,600 per class. So to do this, we're definitely going to need to consider increasing the budget for tuition reimbursement, either as one single line item for the police department or a separate one for our represented employees and our exempt employees. I don't know how the city would like to do that, but all in all, there's no way that well, it would take a very long time for individuals to complete their bachelor's degrees if they're relying on that tuition reimbursement and we run out of money and then they take a semester off or, um, you know, I mean, if someone has 5 classes left, and we run out of money in the first semester because we have patrol officers, sergeants, and lieutenants signing up for classes, then they have to take the rest of the year off, and that could really push each individual back considerably in completing that requirement. And really, the importance of this, when I was going through the process to be hired, one of the big things that was discussed was succession planning, and that being the case, it's very important that I have multiple people within the department that are able to take my position when I leave. Currently, the only position that require a bachelor's degree upon promotion or upon appointment is the deputy chief position. And if we stick with the status quo, then chances are when I leave, 10 years, whatever, we'll be right in the same position that we're in right now, with only having maybe one person qualified to take over the position of chief of police. And my vision is that we would have multiple lieutenants and a deputy chief in position, training and experience and everything that would be necessary to take the chief of police position upon my departure. And then the Police and Fire Commission wouldn't have to. They could still choose to, but they wouldn't have to do a nationwide search for a police chief.
Thank you. And I agree. I mean, I think that's something we've all been a part of as a city, and in these positions with being without a police chief because of some of the reasons you stated and the importance of succession planning. My only concern here is that we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit before we have the funding available to change the job descriptions before the funding's available.
Mhm.
'Cause I agree. I think that we do need to have several people in place to potentially take your position. To do that, they are going to need further education. At the last HR meeting, before you were sworn in, we had an extensive discussion around this about why some of the police department may not be even applying for the funds available because they know they're already taken, or at that time I did some math on how long exactly it would take based on the funds available for these people to get a bachelor's degree. So even when those funds become available, I mean, the requirement for a bachelor's degree, if they're going to go through the process of even taking classes without the funding, I just feel we're a ways away from that. So I think that the funding needs to be addressed before we change any job descriptions, and I just worry about the ability for the current staff members or police department members to elevate into these positions if we change any requirements, and if we need them to and it's in the job description, what that might mean. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, if I've got anything incorrect
Well,
there.
Again, this would just be anecdotal, but of the resumes and cover letters that I've received, I've had a pretty positive response as to the individuals interested in moving into that lieutenant's position, being interested in furthering their education and completing their bachelor's degrees. I don't know how comfortable I would be promoting without that requirement, because again, then we're still in that situation where if they choose to, once they're promoted, once they're put in that position, to not go back to school, then they're not going to be, that's going to be one less individual that I have that is qualified or can move into either my position or that deputy chief position, should that vacancy become available. And I would prefer to have as many qualified applicants for those positions as I can possibly get. So I guess that's my only real comment on that.
Thank you for that information. I guess I would like to perhaps see these come back together. The increase in the education funding and then the change in the job description before potentially making any changes. And I just don't have enough information now on who you might have as applicants or anything to move forward with this, and perhaps that's a conversation me and you can talk about. But
Certainly.
yeah, I just don't have enough information, and I would want to see the funding be agreed to be increased before we put any more hurdles in place in regards of education for who we currently have. But I do agree that we need succession planning for sure.
Yeah, my concern though, Jake, with that is that he's got a number of positions that have to be filled coming up here. And so this process is going to start long before any budget discussions for creating more educational incentives. So we could get pigeonholed potentially in the next couple of months with a couple of lieutenants that will have a bachelor or a associate's degree with no requirement that they have to go back to get their bachelor's degree. So you're already cut, it's already being cut, the opportunity for having a bigger pool of applicants. I think that's almost counterintuitive to succession planning, being that, if requirements aren't in place for a bachelor's degree now prior to making these promotions that have to be made, we're already going to take a number of those spots that should be used hopefully for succession planning now out of that picture. And that's my concern.
If these applicants that would potentially be promoted are promoted, is there some type of protection under the union that they cannot be removed from those positions for if we brought these requirements at a later date?
You couldn't have one set of requirements and say, oh, now we got new set of requirements, you got to comply with these. That I think would be, I don't know if you get anybody that would apply then, being that I don't think you can change it midstream. I think the requirements are at the time of application are what they are. And then if any new requirements down the road, they would be grandfathered from that. So anybody potentially going forward have to have those requirements, but the people currently in the position don't have to be elevated to those requirements.
And that's in the union contract?
So lieutenants are non-union, and so that has nothing to do with union contract then.
So is that just a thought or a policy, or what is that, or is that law that we couldn't go back and potentially require those people to go to school?
I guess Ryan could answer that, but I don't think you can't have one set of requirements, then change the requirements, make those people obtain those requirements. So if you have an associate's degree as the requirement, and then 2 years later you want to make it a bachelor's degree, you can't make those people go back and get a bachelor's degree. I don't know.
Yeah, and for public safety and public service, I'm not exactly sure. I'd probably defer to Sue, but I mean, could it legally be done? I'm guessing you probably could, but from an HR perspective, it's not something that is very, it's not something that would be looked upon kindly, to be like, okay, you got this. But now, there are positions that may require certain accreditations or things of that nature, and I think one thing that became clear to me, and maybe I'm confused here a little bit, but on the police lieutenant, and I think that's what Chief was referring to, and then the mayor tried to build upon that, is for the group currently, our current work group under the CBA, for those that maybe only have an associate's, they are not being deterred currently to apply for these positions. It's just saying if you have the associates and us wanting to move forward going down the road, we would actually ask that you agree to get enrolled in a bachelor's program to finish that, just so you can't come in and say, good, I got in within the time frame, but I'm not going to take any more accreditation. Am I speaking correctly? And that's kind of the goal, is to not cut anybody off now, but to allow the process to continue with the promotional process, but actually asking a requirement that then you would go and continue to further your education to meet that bachelor's degree component.
That's correct. And I've kind of carved out in there options based on if we run out of money in the tuition reimbursement, or maybe there's a personal or professional reason why they need to take a semester off, and also giving them the option to take classes during the summer or not. I think it's pretty fair as far as what we're asking, so that we don't have to just come straight out and say, well, I'm not going to promote anyone unless and until they have a bachelor's degree. I think this was, and we had many discussions about how we would proceed with this, and again, it was very. It's been stressed in a lot of conversations that I've had that succession planning has to be, it needs to be a priority, and it is, and it always was with me. But it's not just me that believes that this is important. I just don't want to put ourselves in a position to just keep kicking the can down the road. So if we decide that we're not comfortable with this job description because we don't have the funding right now, and we haven't had that funding discussion, then my position is probably, again, I have to have some conversations, but my position is probably that I'm not going to fill those positions until this is resolved. So.
Thank you.
Could you just explain what is the bachelor's degree that we're looking at for here? Is it related? I mean, is it all related police duties, or are we I'm coming at you, I guess, blind, or is this a bachelor's degree if I
Well,
went to school?
So I think that, and let me see how I have it worded here so that so a bachelor's degree in police science, criminal justice, or a related field. So, that to me could be, psychology or sociology, or, other fields that would relate to what we do in our job. Does that answer your question?
And how long does this take to acquire this? What's the
Well, officers have to have a minimum of 60 semester hours prior to being hired. So that's essentially that's essentially a 2-year degree.
Yeah.
So full time it would be another 2 years. Not full time, it could take anywhere from, if they go continuously, it could take 4 years to complete that. Some of the individuals that we have been continuing with their education all along, so they don't have a long time remaining. One of the applicants that I have for the lieutenant position is set to finish his bachelor's degree in December of 24. so that's a year and a half from now. I guess just as an example, because he has been going back, he has gone back to school and he has been taking classes, and a lot of that again is based on the funding, the tuition reimbursement funding. Some individuals will pay for it out of their pocket if the funding isn't available, or they'll just wait until the funding becomes available. So, but I also put that in the job description that they have the option to not continue if the fundings aren't available, and until the fundings become available, or the funding becomes available again, to sign back up for classes.
They're doing this while they're still on the job. I mean, this isn't that they take a sabbatical or whatever.
Correct.
And go to school.
That's correct. And it's not uncommon in this career field for that. I'm signed up for master's classes right now.
Yeah.
I have 5 classes left to complete my master's degree, and I'm paying for it out of my own pocket. So I'm not asking anyone to do anything that I haven't done myself, or that's uncommon in the field of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people get hired with the minimum requirement for the job, and then they continue their education throughout their career so that they can move up within an organization. And this isn't exclusive to Wisconsin Rapids.
No. Understand. And I'm not disagreeing. I just wanted to get a little better handle on what
Absolutely.
for myself. And I think what would we be looking at for a cost? I mean, do you have that? What would that be for an individual?
Well, it depends on how many classes that they have left right now, and tuition, depending on what school they're going to. Some schools will, when you first enroll, they'll lock in a tuition rate for the entire time you're going to that school, and you won't see an increase until as long as you continue to go to school there and you graduate from there. Some schools increase tuition rates regularly. So I can't give you a number other than we're looking at probably around the current costs around a little over $1,600 for a class.
I think if that's the route that the committee ends up, wanting to go, is that at some point in time, I think we'd have to look at dollar-wise of how we're going to fund the program. I think if you want to make the step forward to get the ball rolling and not to, as you said, kick the can down the road,
Right.
because we do that on a number of issues, I think, at times, and this is maybe one that if this is the route to proceed with, and that there is that need for those individuals to have that degree, I think that's the initiative or whatever that we should be taking, and the funding part of it as to be addressed with the budget or whatever at the appropriate time. Obviously, I wouldn't want to get to the point of that somebody couldn't afford to go to do that. That would deny them then that opportunity to progress.
Right, and
so
I agree with that. I think that's why I've worded it, the way that I have, in that with those funds being available is when you need to sign up for a class and be taking a class. If they're not available, or if something else comes up that would require you to take a semester off or whatever, then that's something we can discuss. So.
Thank you.
Is there currently, this is for the position of Deputy Chief of Police, is there currently any Deputy Chief of Police in Wisconsin Rapids?
There is not, well, we have an interim deputy chief right now in Mike Pataki.
If we approve this, how many are you looking to add to this position? Is it just a one-person job, or is it going to be like three and then?
No, the deputy chief position is we currently only have one deputy chief. There's a chief, a deputy chief, and then five lieutenants, and four sergeants.
So in the future, it's just the one position that you're
For the deputy
funding?
chief position,
Yes.
correct.
Okay, Tom had talked about the cost a little bit, and you had said $1,600 per class, depending on how many classes they have. If they have, say they need all the classes, how many classes is that?
Again, it depends on the individual. Some people have already been continuing their education and have gotten to a point now, like one of my applicants for the lieutenant position had indicated that he will be graduating in December of '24 with his bachelor's degree. So that's what, five more terms, maybe four more terms. So that would be, one example that I can give you, but I don't have where every person is.
Yeah, what I'm asking is if, say they had no schooling and they needed the whole course, but you found the right person, he had no schooling,
Right.
how
so
many
you're-
how many classes would that be at $1,600?
So you're probably looking at 20 classes, probably.
Chief, can I add something quick?
Certainly.
Or Patrick? So I believe to be hired at the PD, you have to have 60 credits already just to get hired. To get a bachelor's is 128 credits. So assuming a individual comes in with an associate's degree, they most likely have at minimum 64 credits already. So they would need 64 additional credits to reach the bachelor level. Some potentially have more, as Chief alluded to. Others have less, and they haven't quite attained it. But right now, our current qualifications are 60 credits to qualify for employment, among other things, at the police department. So they're going to have a minimum of 60 coming in the door here. So you take 128 minus 60 would be 68.
How many credits is a class? It's
Three.
Typically.
Correct.
So I think that's important.
Right.
Yep. Thank you. Sorry.
Is this position that we are filling, is it a restructure of or is it a new position, or is it just the current position? Like,
It's a current position that we're filling. It has been left as an interim position since the last chief left.
okay, my last question is, could they move money from another line item in the budget for this year to take over these courses and accomplish what you want to do?
I would be happy to have that discussion and do that if that's a possibility.
I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in. First of all, I think a big part of the discussion that's going to happen going forward is at $10,000 budgeted for their tuition reimbursement right now. That's 6 classes a year. I think I've talked to Chief a little bit, and potentially we might be looking at up to $30,000 a year. With not having the people in the department right now to meet the requirement as a lieutenant, if we're going to require a bachelor's degree, all that money is going to go towards them getting their bachelor's degree, and it just seems like we'll never get caught up at that rate. We're talking about succession planning, and if we're investing all that in and I do believe this is an investment in our lieutenants to get them to where they need to be. We're not bringing the guys along below them. So I think it's going to be critical that we increase this. I'm not comfortable in doing that today. I think we need to have some discussions with them and probably work through the budget process. But again, I want to point out, we're probably going to approve this payment of recruit school for the new officers, and I think it's important that we keep the continuing ed going for the people that we're bringing in and the people that we have. I don't think we should just pay to get them through the recruit school and stop there. So again, in my mind, this is an investment. I do have two concerns. The one concern is that all this money is going to go towards the lieutenants, and everybody else is going to be, I don't want to say left out, but I mean, they're just going to have to wait. I don't think that's right. And the other thing is we do have a division within this group that specifically the detectives, as a requirement to move on to a lieutenant, you have to have a sergeant. You have to have some experience as a sergeant, and they do not have a sergeant in that division right now. I think I looked at the thing, and the difference was about $3,000 a year. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, sir. That's, yeah, when we looked at that yesterday, that's what we came to.
So if we were to add that position in there, and when I say add, I'm not talking about adding extra people. This is something that would have to be negotiated with the union. I think more discussions with the chief. I think there's a lot of things here that we need to look at before we push this forward. I think we want to do this right. And before I'm finished, but I'm curious, Mike, do you have anything? I mean, you have more experience in that department than anything you want to add, or? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're.
No, I agree with the chief. Education is huge, and you don't want to, like Jay said, you don't want to give it to all the lieutenants and then the lower people don't get it. Me and Jay had a conversation. He had talked about having a pool for the lieutenants and a pool for the sergeants and below. I think that would be a good option, because then you're splitting it up between them, so you're giving everybody a kick at the cat, which I think is a good thing. The education thing is huge. As you move up in the agency, like you said, if you want to have someone that's going to, or more than one person that's going to be able to replace the chief when he leaves, you need to have that incentive to get the people to get their education before they get to that level and before the chief leaves. So if you want to have people that come up through the department and get to be the chief of police, this is something I think that's very important and that you guys need to look at and consider.
Thanks, Mike. And again, I don't know if everybody knows, but Mike's hanging her up. I'd like to say thanks and good luck. Welcome.
Hold on, Mike.
Mayor.
So I think you're looking at this, there's multiple things going on here. Obviously, there's a budgetary issue, which we're in June. We're going to be starting the budget here shortly, I'm sure. In July, they'll start working through. Obviously, we've got many members of the council here, and I think hopefully this will be a priority, or at least an additional line item in the budget for non-union educational incentive or something like that. But I still think that it's important to address these qualifications, because as the chief pointed out, it doesn't make sense to promote anybody now under the existing qualifications. And Mike can experience how long this past year has been that there has not been people promoted and I wouldn't allow the promotions till we had a police chief anyways. So we were dealing with interims, and I don't know. I think dragging out non-promotions for additional, well, technically, if you're going to wait till we figure out the money end of it, that you're talking another 6 months till we approve a budget. I think it's a disservice to the department that we stay in limbo again. I think having this bachelor's degree is very important. It's been the standard for forever, and then somehow previously it kind of dropped off. So we didn't have this bottleneck of issues with education, because pretty much there was a number of people that went in and got their bachelor's degree while they were in patrol, but we've come into this bottleneck now due to a situation that was beyond any of our controls. yeah, we're gonna have to play a little catch up, but this never was an issue before, wanting to go to school and getting your bachelor's degree with, I think, even less money available at that time also. But I think it's important that we address the minimum standards. Otherwise, we're just going to stay in limbo again here, and I don't think that's fair to the department and going further in the department and getting people in positions. As you know, that anytime you get into a new position, there's experience that has to be gained and knowledge, and just holding this off again, it's not fair to the department. Thank you.
Two things. One thing I would like to see, if we're going to pay for somebody's education, that they stay with the department or pay back that money that we paid for their education. The other thing is, I think it would be helpful if we had Tim and Sue here to see if we could move over some of the money from a different line item and some of these other questions that we had.
So historically, at the end of the budget, I wish Tim was out in the hall, is that it's not whether you're over by a line item, it's whether you're over by the overall budget. So if he has an area of the budget that he figures that he can utilize for, let's say we've got plenty of range bullets and he's got a couple $1,000s or money left over in the range account, then he could utilize that money for that. So it's not really specifically by individual line items. It's overall budget, that the concern of whether being over or under. So I agree. I think if there's money there, and we can double check with Tim, but yeah, if we've got a line item that has more than what's needed, then that could be utilized. Absolutely.
Is there money? That's kind of what we're getting at. I mean, are we on budget? Are we under budget? Like,
I would just add, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I wouldn't be opposed to taking this potential 2024 budget issue up early whenever that wants to be done, to have some sort of approval or agreement in place earlier than when we do the whole budget together. However we want to do that would have to be worked out, but I think we can work these two together, in my opinion, and this can be not denied, but perhaps we wait until we figure more of this out and then see where it goes. But I would have no problem taking this item up for next year's budget early. And then I just had a question. I mean, don't we move money into different funds, the discretionary fund or the fund? We oftentimes get things that come to us and we have to take it out of that fund to go other places.
Transfer resolution.
Yeah,
Yep.
transfer. Yeah. So I mean, if this is important, which it sounds like it is, maybe that's something we consider as well to speed this process up and get all the right things in place when we finalize this.
is there any way that we could have a meeting before the common council meeting in a week and have this line item, just review it? You can come back and say, yes, I have the money, or no, this is what we're going to need, or whatever. Like, is that fair?
I guess the question is, how much money are you looking for? You're looking for enough money to give everybody a bachelor's degree, or are we looking to cover a couple of classes? Because it really doesn't change it at the end of the day that, if the minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree, well then, I guess I'm not sure how much money you're looking for. Because if it's an additional $20,000, which, who knows, maybe, or $10,000 in a non-union education fund, I'm just kind of curious as the quantity of money that would satisfy the approval of the bachelor requirement. Because I'm kind of confused by why they're contingent upon each other. but you never will, because you don't know if 10 people want to get their bachelor's degree or 3 people. So you really can't. Mhm. Right. Yeah, I just think that they're unrelated in my opinion, but I just don't know what money would satisfy the council to approve the job requirements so then they can go ahead with the promotion process.
I have a question for Chief, and I think we talked about it a little bit before, but I don't think right now that the deputy chief's position is even part of this discussion. I think that's something we could separate out and prove this afternoon. You could get moving on. But what about holding these other two out for a month, and what kind of effect will that have on you and the department right now?
So, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's going to be a process for a selection process for the lieutenant and sergeant's positions that is going to take some time, whether it be a month or, I mean, I could foresee it taking about a month before I even have an eligibility list for the two separate positions. So as far as pushing those two descriptions back until we can have further discussions, it really wouldn't adversely affect my process. Now, as long as everything else can stay essentially the same, so that I can move forward with testing and interviews and things like that, if we're looking at making substantial changes, then I would have to put the whole process on hold.
I don't think we're looking at making wholesale changes to what you've presented here for these positions. I think it's just a matter of some funding issues, and I would hope that we could get enough information in the next month that we could make a decision probably in July. Again, I think we can approve the assistant chief this afternoon and then commit to getting the rest of this done for July's meeting and ready for council in July. Questions, comments, or suggestions? Mayor?
So I guess, what is your request of staff to have ready for you in July? This meeting.
I think we're going to be looking, and again, nobody can predict the future. You can't predict who's going to be looking to get the money for the continuing ed. But I think we're all in agreement that what we're doing now isn't enough. So I think maybe get Tim involved in the process, see what we can do for this year, see what we need to do for next year. I think that's, for me right now, that's the big one. And then the other possibility is Chief and I just briefly discussed it, the possibility of creating a sergeant's position in the detective bureau, but there's some work to be done on that, and obviously that would have to be negotiated. So, and if there is no interest from the union side in that, then I guess that's not going to be an issue.
Okay.
I have more specific ideas. So the applicants that you're looking at, obviously you might not know who you want to hire yet, but potential costs with their education, and then perhaps a survey to the department to see who's interested in furthering their education, so we can have some type of idea of what we're looking at here instead of a number like what was thrown out earlier was increasing from 10 to 30,000. It might not even be enough. We just don't know what the numbers look like to put an amount on the education fund in general. So some type of number on what the cost would be for the applicants to continue, or we talked about splitting it up into two different. So how those would be drawn from, and then perhaps a survey of who's even interested in furthering their education, because we don't need to put more in than perhaps is needed if only half the department's interested even.
And we could certainly do that, and you're going to find that individuals aren't going to take full-time classes. They're not going to take a full class load. So you can probably come up with at least a a general idea of what we need for the remainder of this year. And then, maybe have an idea of who is going to continue their education going forward for the budget process for next year. I mean, if that's what you're referring to, I think that's doable. But as far as it being a huge amount for the rest of this year, I don't see that being the case. But it may be, again, hypothetically, it may be, another $10,000 for the rest of this year, because we need to get, people that were moving into those positions started in classes. Of course, they'll likely take one class at a time, plus still make funds available for sergeants and patrol officers so that we don't bottleneck the program as was discussed earlier. So,
Yeah, whatever that is, if we could just get that number, I think that would clear some things up at least.
okay, I'll do that.
I guess two things. One is, the request has been made that we move to a first floor conference room. I would believe there's court in here this afternoon, so I think maybe to wrap this part of this up, I would make a motion to approve the deputy chief's position and hold off or hold these over till July for the other two positions. Is there a second? I'm hearing no second. Go ahead.
I would like to. I just need a little bit of time on this. I'm sorry. Can we just recess for 5 minutes while we move?
Sure. All right, we will get back together again at 3:15 in the first floor conference room.
I think it's the first time I've been thrown out of court.
Yeah, right?
Usually they want to keep me when I'm there.
up where we left off, the discussion on the job descriptions and the possibility of the job descriptions in the police department. Who's up? Mayor?
So, in talking to the police chief, you know, technically, and I think Sue can confirm, the deputy chief and the sergeant position are unchanged. So there's nothing for you to approve there. And by policy, I can authorize him to fill that position. The only change in the documents that you have is in the lieutenant position, creating a bachelor's degree requirement.
Yeah, and to clarify that, the bachelor degree requirement and the requirement of having served as a sergeant are the only two substantive changes that I made in the lieutenant's job description.
So really, the deputy chief and the sergeant are a moot point. There's nothing needs to be approved because it's already been approved, and that's the existing job description. It's the lieutenant one that's in discussion.
Comments? Questions?
So a bachelor's degree was already,
That's what was at the, for deputy chief, yes.
okay.
Yes, that position hasn't changed. That's always been that requirement. And none of these positions are new positions. They're all just been vacant. The deputy chief position has been vacant, so we need to move someone up into that position. And then that creates openings in the lieutenant's position. And then with interim deputy chief Mike Pataki retiring, that is another lieutenant's position that is being created. And then when you move people from sergeant into the lieutenant's positions, then we have to promote people from patrol to fill those sergeant's positions. There's nothing new in any of these positions.
So it sounds to me like you're looking more for funding for the education more than
Well,
if you.
I'm looking for the approval of that job description, which will require or will require that tuition reimbursement to be either be increased, or it's going to substantially prolong the process for someone to complete that requirement. There's no time limit on the requirement, and it's just based on them agreeing that when I get promoted to lieutenant, that I'm going to continue my education based on the set criteria that I put forth in the job description until I get my bachelor's degree. It's not like I'm giving you 2 years or a year or any specific length of time. It's just continue your education until you get your bachelor's degree. And funding, in lieu of funding availability and things like that. So yes, the increase in that tuition reimbursement is certainly a topic of concern, because it's the current line item, or the current budget for that is nowhere near enough. And then if you decide to approve this, then I think we're obligated to provide that funding, because we're requiring them to have a bachelor's degree at that point. Does that?
There. And the funding actually is a finance issue, because it's budgetary and not an HR issue.
Right.
Kind of all goes hand in hand, though. I mean, if the way it's sitting right now, I mean, we could debate that. This
finance.
position's not going to get approved if the funding isn't there, more than likely.
And that's been the age-old, is it the cart before the horse? You fund a position, or do you create the position and fund it? But education is a line item within the budget, and so that is a budgetary issue, which is finance.
But it's tied to a job position right now that.
So you're saying we need to get rid of committees?
It's really, but like me myself though, I came in with a bachelor's degree, so it's a moot point, would have been a moot point for me when I got hired at the PD. And so it's really not tied together to a position, because, people come in with bachelor's degrees and not just associate's degrees.
I guess in my mind, this goes to Chief's point of succession planning, and the majority of our department right now has associate's degrees, correct?
The majority do. We do have individuals who have already completed their bachelor's degrees. so this won't affect them in any way. But with the current staffing that I have right now, it does make a difference in who I have as sergeants who have I think I have one sergeant right now that has, out of 4, that has a bachelor's degree. So that, I guess, kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. And then we do have patrol officers that are continuing their education. So there are individuals who are taking it upon themselves to already be doing this and in the process. It's really just the sticking point with this lieutenant's position and requiring a bachelor's degree there. And it's very important that we keep that in there. However, we decide to fund it or whatever. If we don't, then we are going to end up in the same situation that we were in when Chief Blevins left, when I leave. And it could be 15 years down the road, still in the same position, because we don't require that bachelor's degree. So what's the incentive for someone to get a bachelor's degree to become a lieutenant? And then we end up with maybe 1, maybe 2 people that are even qualified for the position of police chief, or say the deputy chief leaves, I'm still here, the deputy chief retires, and that position already requires a bachelor's degree. What if I don't have any lieutenants with a bachelor's degree at that point? Then it continues to be this kind of, again, like I said earlier, we're kicking the can down the road if we continue to do this.
Well, and one thing, if I may, one thing to add, and while it will be an unpopular statement, I think it still holds true. There's nothing preventing anybody from the PD from pursuing their classes if the funding's not there.
Right.
And that's what struck me is when the mayor just said he came in with a bachelor's degree to begin. So there's nothing to preclude anybody from, well, I can't move forward. No, you can. Yes, the tuition reimbursement is a fabulous thing, and it's the way of the world nowadays. But 30 years ago, I don't know what the tuition reimbursement policy was here, but there wasn't quite the uptick because the labor market was a lot different maybe 30 years ago. So now that's a new recruitment and retention tool is the tuition reimbursement continuing education component. So 20 years from now, we might be sitting here thinking, how do we go back or fix what the new dynamics are in the workforce? So it's not to say they can't take the courses, it's just that.
To that, me personally, I am enrolled in classes for my master's degree. There's no money right now I was told there's no money to provide me with any tuition reimbursement. I'm still paying for the classes, I'm still taking the classes, so absent any sort of reimbursement, and it's not a requirement for my position, it's just me personally trying to better myself, personally and professionally, so.
I guess the only thing I would say to that is, not everybody's in that position that can afford to do that. I mean, we've probably got people with young families and things like that, and you sure don't want to exclude anybody just because they can't afford that, so I agree.
Yeah, I'll bring this back a bit to, I think that where the requirement and where we got stuck with promotions, particularly in the area of police chief, was a state requirement. Is that correct, of some type of bachelor's degree, or what's the requirement for a police chief in the state?
The PFC has it set as a bachelor's degree.
Okay, so that's where we're running into the trouble, right?
It's pretty much common.
When we had the conversation,
No, it was a number in 5 years of supervisory experience of a lieutenant or higher. Was also, I think that was another issue.
yeah, so we just had nobody, it sounded like, so that's the issue we're trying to solve.
Correct.
The essential problem, so.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
this is all discussion around that.
Yep.
Not necessarily forcing everybody to get bachelor's degrees.
Correct.
Just because. We're just trying to solve one issue, and I think that needs to be clear, that we don't have succession planning right now,
Right.
and that's what this is all.
Because we want that lieutenant and higher to have a
Right.
bachelor's degree, because you're getting your 5-year supervisory as a lieutenant
Right.
or a deputy chief, But yeah, it's the bachelor's degree that you need, and without that, then, yeah, your pool is limited, and
I just don't want it to sound like with where the conversations went that we're just requiring bachelor's degrees.
Right,
for-
right.
yeah, Get back to why we're doing
yeah,
it.
if you wanna become
Succession.
a lieutenant or above, you know, you can stay as a sergeant the rest of your life, and more power to you, but if you have a desire to be a police chief somewhere down the road, then you need to do these steps, and we're just trying to get it in place, so we have a pool of people, so we don't ever have to go external again, and trying to make that happen. And obviously, you know, the chief isn't going anywhere anytime soon, so we have time to build that and get these people into positions and get them the education and the experience, and we have that benefit of time yet on our side, but we need to get it in place.
Well, after all of this, he's probably wondering what he got himself into.
I did say, I know to self-touch on.
Where's my resume?
Don't sweat, Mike.
But I think at least the deputy chief and the sergeant thing is really a non-issue, and so it's really kind of what you want to do as a lieutenant at this point.
So you're gonna address the deputy chief and sergeant issue with your
Because
authority?
my policy is that if the position is staying the same as is, then it doesn't need to come to council.
Yeah.
It's done, but if we want, like code enforcement, if we want to make a change to it, then that has to be brought back to council. So really, the deputy chief and the sergeant is a viewpoint, and it's the change in the lieutenant's job description, which is really what the wrestle is at this point.
Okay, so 2/3 of it, you're. able to
2/3 of it's
support that.
kind of really a viewpoint.
So I'd hold over the lieutenant discussion till common council or another HR meeting. I mean, I feel like we went round and round here, and I still don't, I personally feel like I still don't have what information might need to be in place to vote on it, so I would abstain or vote against it anyways until I got to that point. So that's where I'm at.
I'd like to, okay, so the chief is in charge of his men, right? So whatever he deems worthy, like if they need whatever, I think that's fine. And I'm fine with approving whatever he wants to put down. I don't see our need, though, to have to fund the requirements, though. So I'm fine with approving job descriptions. I'm fine with that, but, like Ryan had said, that if they wanna go on their own and continue with their own education, that's fine. And as the mayor had pointed out, that it is up to finance to see if they wanna fund it. But I don't think that it should be put out there that, hey, HR approved this requirement, we need to fund it.
Right.
Is that a motion? Is that a motion, Patrick?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve, job descriptions for deputy chief of police, police lieutenant, and police sergeant as presented. That's all there is.
So, I'll second the motion, and the reason I'll second the motion is one, we'll let the council decide. I mean, we're gonna have this discussion again, I'm sure. And the other condition of this is we have to commit to this tuition and the succession plan, we have to commit to that, so. We're not gonna resolve all that this afternoon, but I think we're gonna be having this discussion again in a week.
But is it gonna be solved in a week? Is it worth the discussion in a week?
I think we can get some questions answered in a week. I think the questions that we need answered, I think
Okay.
I can.
Alright, well, I hope we can, cause otherwise I feel like we'll still be in the same place. Those guys, well, we got a couple here tonight, but the other guys are gonna be stage one of this conversation that we just had tonight, that we're gonna try to get them to vote to on common council, so that's kind of
As
this.
said, we're gonna have this discussion again after Patrick's meeting, or just eliminating committees. There's a motion on the floor, a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Yes.
Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it. On to item number 4. Discuss and consider for approval the proposed job description for code enforcement officer position as a sworn officer with the police department. Again, see the attachment. Mayor, Ryan, who's taking this one?
I think it's the police chief's job description.
Chief?
So, basically, having this position come over to the police department gives us an opportunity to be a little bit more proactive in code enforcement. You know, when things come in regarding ordinance violations, things like that that are of concern to neighborhoods, you know, grass too long, people parking in their front yards, other parking complaints, things of that nature. We can send a code enforcement out there, have the code enforcement address the issue with the homeowner immediately, and use discretion in making an enforcement decision, whether it be, hey, you have, you know, this amount of time to correct this issue, or issuing a citation, or issuing a citation and sending out a notice, a letter to them saying that they have to get it remedied to avoid, you know, further penalties, things like that. So, I mean, the particular position, I guess, in my view, is an individual that's really focused on, it's a Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 position, whatever, focused on code enforcement, focused on city ordinance violations, and you know, things of that nature that were previously held in community development and done out of that office. You know, I think that having a uniformed law enforcement officer in a marked vehicle, anecdotally could possibly get you maybe more compliance than someone in just a city vehicle in a collared shirt and approaching, you know, the homeowner in that regard. And you know, it's something that I'm willing to keep on top of, and you know, make sure that we're addressing these concerns and we're taking them seriously, and like I said, being proactive in our response to code violations. Again, whether it's parking, you know, what other ordinance violations there may be. That, and I don't know how they're currently being handled, other than there's a lot of letters being mailed out to people to correct certain violations, and that doesn't, I guess in my opinion, that doesn't have to be the first step. You know, the first step can be a police officer going and knocking on the door and addressing the homeowner and saying, hey, you need to fix this violation, or you know, these are the consequences of that of the violation. And if you know, if someone's in need of assistance, we can also make those types of referrals as well. You know, maybe it's a situation where, you know, the grass is too high in their yard or whatever, and we can get out there, have the officer go out there and address that situation. Maybe the individual is invalid or something and can't mow their lawn, and you know, we can attempt to find resources. That's just an example, but attempt to find resources to accommodate those things too. More of a full service kind of approach rather than just enforcement. I mean, I know it says code enforcement officer, but you know, there are other ways to remedy these types of issues than just, you know, writing tickets and sending letters. So,
Does everybody have the job description proposed?
Yeah, I have a question. So we voted to, or not we, but the council as a whole voted to approve the position and move it to the police department already. So this is just a job description for that position.
Correct.
Okay. So. I got more of a problem with the code than I do the enforcement officer, and they're just separate issues. But since the position's already been approved, I mean, if any opinion that anybody might have had, like mine, that battle's lost, so we're just approving job description.
Correct.
So I'll motion to approve the job description for code enforcement officer position as a sworn officer within the police department.
There's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion?
I'm just wondering if maybe, you want this to be basically an assignment of duties of one of your
Correct.
officers, right?
That's
I just-
correct. It'd be a
maybe
sworn
just,
officer that would be assigned to do that.
Yeah, maybe include that, because then we'll need to talk to the union kind of about that, but just to make it clear.
Tell me the words you want me.
I don't, is there a place in here that says?
What do I gotta add?
Just that the code enforcement officer would be, well, what do you call it, an assigned duty or an assigned position?
We call it
Assigned by the
school
chief,
liaison, but like
it's not like a
special.
promotion, right?
No, I wouldn't call it.
Special assignment?
No,
I wouldn't call it that.
cause it's like a school liaison officer, like,
It's not a promotion,
it's not a promotion.
it's a
It's an
total
appointment.
control
An
of the.
appointment,
An appointment.
appointment of a existing or?
Well, I mean, we have special assignments for negotiators, for, investigators, for SRT, for,
Okay, special
resource.
assignment, yes, special duty, no.
right,
Right,
right, correct. Special assignments.
Yeah, that'll work.
I don't understand why that needs to be in the motion.
Well, I think it's important in terms of.
Motion to approve the proposed job description for the code enforcement officer position as a sworn officer within the police department. Is there anything, as a special assignment or as, would it,
Right.
By appointment.
Because
by appointment?
Right, by appointment by the police chief.
Yeah, it's.
Okay, got it.
appointed by the police chief. There you go.
Right.
Motion to approve the proposed job description for code enforcement officer as sworn officer within the police department as appointed by the police chief.
I'll second it, but I do have a question. Interesting you brought it up. Do we have a vehicle available for this position, or are we gonna send them out in a little red car? Do we have a vehicle?
There's vehicles.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tom's got a question.
Tom, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
I think this goes back to
After Tom.
what I was trying to get at the council meeting the other night. I did vote against switching departments, I do believe, but, that notwithstanding, it went through. But the question is that basically we eliminate a position. Yeah. I have yet, where are we, or I'm missing something.
You're working.
Where are we, we're taking,
One FT out of code enforcement, moving one FT to PD.
the code enforcement is becoming somebody that's already there.
He's talking about taking someone off patrol and putting them in code enforcement.
But they're gonna
We,
fill a
and the
patrolman.
chief is mentioning this about being an 8 to 4:30 job.
Yeah.
We're not overstaffed in the PD now.
So, correct. So
Somebody's gonna be off, somebody's not gonna be patrolling.
we would have to hire someone
Yeah.
before we fill this position.
So that will be the plan then.
Yes. So the plan is to hire someone before we fill this position, so that we're not, and have them, essentially, within a reasonable amount of time, ready to take on the duties of the patrol officer before we move another patrol officer into this position. And in the meantime, we're going to absorb, my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to absorb the duties of that code enforcement officer in our patrol division until we can put somebody in that position full-time once the current code enforcement officer retires or resigns, or he's retired, right? When he retires. So that my position or my understanding is on that, is that we're gonna get the duties, assigned to that position before I'm able to even fill that position. But that's okay, we'll make it work.
Got it?
I got it, I'm just wondering how long it's gonna take to fill a position.
It's not gonna be overnight, that's
I
for
know.
sure.
That's what I was getting at the other night at the council.
Well, I guess you could ask the question, if we were gonna fill that vacancy up in code enforcement, how long would it take? And I can tell you right now, with what we were paying this code enforcement officer, it might take a while. I mean, there's reasons that he was making what he was making, but I think that would be a tough sell up there. So, I think the other benefit to this is, and Chief just said it, is not always, but we have potentially an entire department that can, or there's a patrol group that can pick up a little bit of this from time to time when they're available, so.
Honestly, my hope is that, you know, because, matter of fact, I just got a phone call yesterday about another big nuisance property, mattresses laying around. And my hope is that, you know, once to get the handle on it, on some of the big issues, you know, it's the hoarding issues of people, things under tarps in people's yards. And, you know, once that's all caught up, then it'll be really, I think, be managed by the code enforcement officer. And I think that'll give them opportunities, as in the job description, that they can kind of expand, like, you know, you want to start a neighborhood watch in your program, or in your neighborhood, and some of those type of community type activities, they would be available. Or in your neighborhood, Patrick.
Yeah.
But and I guess we don't need to talk about it, but yeah, your issues with the code, I think those are things that can be addressed too down the road, you know?
I think that's why I started when I was speaking on this, that this is a job description.
Right.
The position's approved.
Yep.
The battle on that, of just not having a code enforcement officer in general.
Right.
Is done, so my motion is
Dennis?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question would be, with this new position, will this, what type of salary will the person have? The same as a regular patrolman, or
Yes,
a
sir.
little bit more, because,
They are essentially a patrol officer with different job duties, just like our school resource officers are and our detectives are. It's just different duties for the same patrol officer position.
and then that position would be open to anybody on the force? They could apply for it and
Yeah,
step down, or what?
Well, no, any patrol officer could, or a detective, if they wanted to, they could,
Okay.
they could put in for that position. I would prefer, and this is for a selection process, but just for your information, it to be a veteran officer who, you know, who knows his or her way around town and has a really good handle on city ordinances and things like that. I wouldn't personally put a brand new police officer into that position and expect them to do well.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick?
I don't know if you know, but I'm completely against this, and I think it's not very constitutional. But anyway, that beside the point, you think this is a full-time job to make sure that people have their lawns mowed and their garbage cans pulled in?
So, at my previous agency, we had 3 people doing this job.
And how big of a city did you come from?
31,000 population with 53 sworn officers in the department. So, yeah, I do believe that it's a full-time job. Now, just like any other job on a police department, it's what you make of it, and you need to select the right individual to do the job. But if you select the right individual and you supervise them appropriately, then it's going to be a full-time job.
So are we still gonna get reports from the individual about, cause right now we get monthly reports about kinda what he was.
That is my understanding that's what, that's one of the requirements of this position.
Yeah, I think it's in the job description.
So,
Digital photos
I saw that.
and prepare detailed and specific reports.
I mean, as a council, we're gonna get the reports.
If you want the reports, I'll get you the reports.
Says provide a monthly report to the mayor's office and city council regarding status of complaints and resolutions.
Yeah, there you go.
Number 18.
Knew it was in there somewhere.
Oh, yep, you're right. I missed it somewhere.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ayes have it. On to item number 5. Consider for approval a memorandum of understanding with Wisconsin Rapids Professional Police Association regarding recruit officers. Against the attachment. Chief, so who we got?
Yeah, this is the MOU, I think we talked about it at the last meeting, and it approved one version of it, but the union wanted some changes made, and we met with them a couple weeks ago, I believe, and worked it all out. So what we have is the MOU, which was approved by the union last week, I believe. I think the only change was regarding reimbursement of, just some different language on the reimbursement part of it, of when you would reimburse, just to make it kind of more on a case-by-case basis instead of arguing over where they live and what tech college is doing the recruit academy. I think that was.
Basically, their concern was that if we hired someone and sent them to an academy outside of Wisconsin Rapids, Fox Valley, or whatever, Eau Claire, things like that, that we would reimburse them their travel, lodging, meals, things like that. We don't intend to send anyone outside of Wisconsin Rapids for the job unless, of course, they live closer to that particular training academy, and then it wouldn't be the same as if we were sending someone from Wisconsin Rapids to Eau Claire or Fox Valley. And in that situation, if we were to, and under the agreement, send someone to one of those locations from Wisconsin Rapids, then we would pay the travel from the police department to that location. But we have no intention of sending anyone to any other school other than Midstate. So it wasn't really something that we needed to argue over in our negotiations. Again, we still have the carve out or the understanding that if someone lives closer to that particular school and we have the opportunity to send them to that school and it's more convenient for them to go there for that class, for that schooling, then we could still send them there and not pay that travel from Wisconsin Rapids PD because they are already there, and it's just like they go work there instead of coming here. Eventually, they're gonna end up having to move here or move within the residency requirement, and all of that, but we could get them, hired and get them in school and get them, going in the right direction, towards getting our staffing back up to where it needs to be, so.
And also, I believe those costs are reimbursed by the state also.
Right, the DOJ reimburses a number of those costs, so.
Yeah, interesting. I don't, Mid-State's wide-ranging area here in central Wisconsin. I don't see that being an issue, but you never know. So I'm glad you guys worked that out. I guess my question is gonna be, when are you gonna start the hiring process, and then when will the recruits start the academy?
Actually, the next academy starts in August and it's full. But that doesn't mean that we can't try to recruit individuals from.
We have actually, our current person that's on our eligibility list is going through the academy in August.
So we'd have one that we can hire.
Yes.
We can hire right away. And we already started the background check.
Yes.
But if we don't hire him, when's the next academy?
Well, they have do I have 2 a year?
Yeah, twice a year, spring
Um,
and fall.
I guess it doesn't change anything in here. It was just a question.
Right, and we're going to actively try to recruit individuals who aren't sponsored by other agencies
Right.
that are putting themselves through these schools. So, you know, if they haven't already applied for us, you know, we're gonna reach out to them and try to get them to go through that process and then do the background checks and do all of the hiring process to get them hired, and then offer them a job and pay for their schooling and pay for their wages while they're going.
Yes, this is gonna be a big advantage for us, because right now you go to the recruit school, and let's say half of them aren't sponsored, which means they're hired by a department. If we go in there and we say, hey, you're going through this process right now, if you come apply with us and we decide that we wanna hire you, we'll pay you and we'll pay for your schooling.
Mhm.
What that's gonna do is it's gonna give us a lot more applicants coming from
Right.
the recruit school. So as soon as they're done with that schooling, we can put them out on the roll.
Yeah, yeah, I think that most of this is well vetted in the prior meetings. At this point, I think we were just waiting on the negotiations for the union, which, with that, then I'm gonna make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding recruit patrol officer between the city of Wisconsin Rapids and the Wisconsin Rapids Professional Police Association, Wisconsin Professional Police Association Law Enforcement Employees Relations.
There's a motion on the floor, discussion, Patrick.
Nothing else has changed. That was the only thing that they wanted to change. It's kind of surprising.
I think it was like, everybody agreed, but they were talking a different language.
Yes.
Right, so
Yeah.
another
It was-
question that had come up was if we would hire someone just prior to going to school, and they wanted it so that if we started a formal training process with an individual before going to school, that we would pay them what we would pay a normal patrol officer. Well, we're not going to start any formal training process until after they complete school, regardless. So we just had to sit down and have that conversation so that they understood that our intentions were that if we hired someone a week or two before they go to school, you know, give them time to go through HR and all that stuff before they even go to the school, and then maybe ride along, that we wouldn't do anything more with those individuals training-wise than we would with an intern or, you know, or another ride-along or something of that nature. And then the formal field training process would start when they return, when they're done with the training academy and they come back here. That's when we would start that, and that's when they would be at that full rate anyway. And we just had to have that conversation, and once we had that conversation, everybody was in agreement that was the right way to go. So,
Yeah, the union understands that this is important, and if we want quality people hired here, this is a step we have to take. So they were on board. It was just more of a miscommunication than anything.
Yeah.
Language and
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah.
Yeah.
It really just took having a discussion, you know, face to face, and
Email doesn't always work so good.
and you know, it's a big deal for us, and it will definitely at least in the time being give us an advantage until such time as all other agencies begin to come on board and start doing the same. And when that's going to happen, I don't know.
But we gotta be ready for the next pivot.
Right. So.
Anything else? There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Motion on the, Patrick seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. I guess just one more thing before we adjourn. Next month, 4th of July, we've got a meeting date quickly here. If this will work. July 11th, that's the second Tuesday of July. Does that work?
Don't know, but sure.
Well,
I gotta check with my wife. I mean, I don't think this
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to what I said when we met as a committee. Do
We're
we
not
have to
gonna-
do these during the day?
What's that?
Do we have to do these during the day?
No, we don't have to do them during the day. I think, well, I mean, we've got a baseball coach in our presence. I think that's why we kind of worked around his schedule, but we can definitely.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine, I'm just thinking down the line, I mean,
No, we can set these anytime we want.
okay. Well,
If there's a time.
I'm good right now, I'm just thinking, you know, that whatever the precedent's gonna be, I might run into some troubles at some point,
No,
but.
we can, the time is,
So what, July 11th, what time?
We could go Wednesday, you wanna do Wednesday the 12th later in the day?
if later in the day works better for you guys, that's fine with me.
Wednesdays don't
Depends on the court schedule.
Yep, I don't see anything in first floor conference room on
Okay.
Wednesday. That's why we did Wednesday, but then we were
Doesn't
at the
work for
library.
Patrick.
Patrick just said Wednesdays.
Wednesdays are not good for
I
you.
think we've had this.
Yeah,
That's right,
Wednesdays,
that's
I
right.
celebrate my Sabbath day on Wednesday because I'm always busy on Sunday, so
Okay.
it's my day off.
We can still do the 12th, I'll make it work,
Well, then it'd be the 11th.
or the 11th.
Available, Brian?
Mhm.
Okay, let's tentatively set it for then.
You got it.
What time?
2 o'clock, okay, or do you
Yep.
want to move it back?
No, that's, I'll make it work.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second? I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All those opposed say no. Meeting adjourned at 3:55.